Welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about 5 problems that I have personally with Alexandre Dumas's classic, The Count of Monte Cristo. So, number 1, it's a very, very long book, and I don't have a problem with books being long if they need to be. I know that for a very large plot, books have to be really long to properly develop everything, but this one is unnecessarily so, in my opinion. Um, I think there's a reason I read the full version. I will never read an abridged version if I can possibly help it. But I think there's a reason that most of the copies that are easy to find and very handy are the abridged versions. And I'm actually kind of curious because I don't really like the book. I'm probably not going to, but I'm kind of curious to read the abridged version and see what it's like and see if it's better because I do think that trimmed down, the book would be better. I think it's kind of funny. One of the reasons that I think the book is so long is that at the time Alexandre Dumas was writing this, he was actually being paid by the line. And that also explains partly why there's so much dialogue that maybe seems very drawn out and unnecessary. I think it's because with dialogue, you can get a lot of lines for less words because it doesn't fill up the whole page, but it counts as lines. So I think that might be part of it, and I don't think it was just his for the sake of being like artistic or fully developed that this book is so long. I think there was definitely some other motives for that, and that's partly maybe why it suffers. There's just passages with dialogue that it's just way too much. Characters would not have needed to just keep talking and talking and talking and talking. Which leads to my second problem with it. Number 2 is the characters themselves. When we start out with some good characters, the start of the book is pretty good for the first good few chapters. It starts off pretty strong. We have Edmond Dantes wrongly imprisoned. There's all the drama of his friend who is secretly his rival in his romance because he's in love with Mercedes as well. So there's all this drama. It's a good, strong start for the story. Then he's in prison, and that's a very famous part of the book, his miraculous and very dramatic and scary escape from the prison. I liked the other prisoner, Faria, however you say his name. Good character. All that so far, book's pretty good. And then we move past that. And once you start having these exchanges between characters where they're just telling their stories or just talking, one problem, they talk too much. They will just talk and talk and talk for pages and pages. Other problem is that a lot of the time, all the characters talk in the same way. I know it's part of like the time period. They all speak very polished. It sounds very fancy. I have a hard time believing people really talk like that. Maybe they did. But even if they did, there isn't much to distinguish one character from another. Like you couldn't open the book and be like, okay, this character is talking because of the way that they're talking. Everyone basically sounds the same. They express themselves the same. And even in a time when maybe that's the way people talked, people still have differences in how they express themselves. And for the most part, everyone sounds the same. Like maybe you can forgive like one character or 2 characters for being very fanciful and flowery in their speech and being able to express themselves in this way, but not everybody would. And pretty much everybody does. So that's a problem. I think the characters are not super well done. And there are a lot of them. And even though they're famous characters, I think it's more because of setting rather than personal development because there isn't a lot to them. So number 3, I have deviations from the plot. And I think something this book really suffers from is it'll go off into all these, again, I think adding to the length. He just wanted to make it long. He'll go off into all these side plots, some of which don't really tie back to the main story. Or if they do, they could have been so much shortened. Like, there's this gang of bandits that play into the story, But we have several stories setting up who these bandits are and how they came about that are just these stories completely on their own that don't really end up tying back into the story. As well as just passages of like smaller characters just interacting with other people, just a lot of extra stuff that's very much to the side. This book is so famous for its plot, for its revenge story, but when you read it, so much of it is not adding to that. It's just a lot of deviations. And some of the side stories are fine, and they do add to it, and some of them don't. Number 4, this gets into a little bit more of, a little more specifics. So Edmond Dantes, as the Count of Monte Cristo, you watch his deterioration, and there are things about the book that I do really like. I understand why people like it in its basic form. The story of this very grand revenge, and how as he feels like he's justified in avenging himself on these people who wrongfully imprisoned him, he comes to actually view himself as like an avenging angel. Like he comes to almost believe that because he's so rich and so powerful and he has the power to punish these people, that he is actually like, it's as if he's on a mission from God, like this avenging angel, and he thinks that it is his right to exercise his power over people and use them however he wants to bring about his revenge. And I do like the arc of character while he, as you see him believing that, and then as he works his revenge and he, in doing so, starts harming innocent people, you see his certainty in that kind of start to fade, and he starts to like second guess himself and think that maybe not everything he's doing is actually right, as whole family dies thanks to him, and all these things are coming about, and he's kind of like, it's getting out of control. He always felt like he was in so much control, and then by the end everything's like falling apart. And so I do enjoy that. I enjoy that aspect of the plot a lot. Something that I really don't like about it is the introduction of the character of Heidi. I don't know how to properly pronounce her name either. But this young woman that he has with him, who he rescued from slavery. It's also something of a side plot that would not have really needed to be in the book. With how much the book focuses on the romance between Edmund and Mercedes, to bring in this other character that, of course, is in love with him, even though she's, young enough to be his daughter easily, that he eventually allows himself to, like, love in return. I really don't like that, partly because I don't mind that he and Mercedes, like, don't get to be together in the end. Like, after everything that had happened, you kind of are like, her story is really, really, really sad, and you feel bad for her, but you kind of understand how it's gone beyond the point where they could get back together. And you also have this feeling like, after everything that Edmund has done, he doesn't deserve happiness. And I'm not saying, all the time people get happiness that they maybe don't deserve. I don't really have a problem with that. But it almost felt like the character of Haiti was just put in there so that he could have something of a happy ending. But it doesn't feel satisfying. It doesn't feel like he deserved it. It doesn't feel like their characters are developed enough that he would just be like, yeah, okay, I guess I love you now instead, and let's go be together. It just feels off in a plot that has so built up his past romance that he is then able to move on and have a happy ending, like after all the destruction he's caused. It just doesn't ring very true, especially when Mercedes has a very like sad, lonely ending. I just don't like that. I also don't really care for the whole him being like 50 and her being like 19 or whatever it is. I don't really like that. But so that's one. Number 5, And I suppose you could say that this all ties back to just problems with the characters, but there is this young man that the Count becomes good friends with because he's the son of a really good man who like treated Edmund well or whatever. Back in the day, he becomes friends with him, Maximilian Morel, who is in love with Valentine Villefort, who's the daughter of one of Edmund's enemies. So Edmund's working on destroying the Villefort family without realizing that his friend, Max, is in love with Valentine. So there's this whole thing. The thing that I really don't like that romance is kind of whatever. They're just young, passionate lovers. There's not really anything special there. But something that really bothered me, like the Count all the time is acting like he's just this powerful guy who can just do whatever he wants, and whatever he wants to do is the right thing to do. But at one point, the Villefort family is dying off, and after he realizes, he saves Valentine. He gives her like a pill, however this, works in the book, I guess. He gives her a pill that makes her appear dead, and she is buried. They're all at her funeral. She's buried, and for a month, the Count allows Max to believe that Valentine is dead, in order that, having felt the depths of despair and wanting to die himself for a month, he'll feel the highest joy possible when he's reunited with her. And I was just like, I think he'd be pretty joyful to see her again right after he thought she was dead, that's something that made me angrier than pretty much anything else in the book. It was just like, this guy, he has no right to just do this to people. So annoying, like for a month. And it's like, yeah, it is super frustrating. And Max is like seriously considering killing himself and all this stuff. And the Count's just like, no, you gotta promise me you're not gonna do this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, anything that might have been left of the Count for me was ruined through that, because it's his friend. And it's like he's trying to do this good thing for his friend. And yeah, no, it's awful. I hate it. But there are, like I said, those are my 5 big things with the book. Number 1, just being length. That ties into it in so many ways. There's so much more. You could talk about all the extra stuff that's in there. At its heart, though, like, I think the book is so famous because of its very classical revenge story. It's kind of considered like the ultimate revenge story. And that plotline, if it had been followed in a more true fashion, more straightforward fashion, maybe it is in the abridged version, could be pretty good. I like some of it for sure. I like some of the character arcs, but yeah, overall, I think this book as a whole is very overrated. Definitely not a classic that I enjoyed very much, and don't really understand why people love it so much, at least in its original form. So that's my 5 problems with the Count of Monte Cristo. Thanks.